Next.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this online lecture hosted by the Oxford Centre for Buddhist Studies. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Khenpo Ngawang Tenzin, who is the Tibetan Buddhist visitor at the University of Oxford for the current academic year. He is originally from Mustang, a remote and very beautiful region of the Himalayas in Nepal, and he has trained in the Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism for more than 20 years. He completed his monastic Shedra studies from Sakya College in Dehradun, India in 2010, where he studied under the tutelage of Venerable Khenchen Sonam Gyatso. Since graduating, Venerable Ngawang Tenzin has been involved with the International Buddhist Academy in Kathmandu as a resident teacher for non-Tibetan speakers. His work also includes reviewing publications in progress, oral and written translations from Tibetan into English and Nepali, and vice versa. He has had in the past the opportunity to translate for the heads of the Sakya school, such as His Holiness the 41st and 42nd Sakya Gompa Rinpoches, as well as the heads of the Nagore sub-tradition of the Sakya school. Today, he will be giving a talk entitled Grey Earth, Dwelling into the Historical and Philosophical Nuances of the Sakya School of Tibetan Buddhism. So we very much appreciate Venerable Ngawang Tenzin sharing with us today his knowledge of the key aspects of the Sakya School, relating to its philosophical and historical themes that have played a key role in distinguishing this important school of Tibetan Buddhism. So without further ado, here is Khenpo Ngawang Tenzin.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Oxford Buddhist Center for Studies. That's OBCS, right? I'm very much glad for giving me this platform, and also to all the colleagues who made this possible, especially the Oxford University faculties and everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me and giving this platform. So today I'm going to talk about the history of Sakya. Actually, it was title. I gave the title called actually Grey Earth, but it is sometimes confusing because in Tibetan, when we call Sakya, Kya is generally not white. But then when you look at the commentary, it related to this land before it was actually occupied by the first head of the Kun lineage, Kunji Kalpo, the first founder of the Sakya. And before that, Atisha actually prophesies about this land, and then they have this dream and so forth. And it always come up with the commentary about the land as white earth, actually. So it was supposed to be white earth based on the commentary. But when you look at the title itself only, without looking at the commentary, it becomes gray earth. So this is a little bit conflicting. And but that's the nature of all the extensive, vast teachings. It is always conflicting because it is conflicting based on subjective appearance. It's not. It has nothing to do with objective reality. So therefore, actually, you can also translate that as a white earth, which is also in some commentary it is mentioned. So this topic will try to cover basically few things, like first going through the history of Sakya order, how it became, or based on the Jamgon Amishaps. The most extensive history of Sakya is actually written by Jamgon Amishap. It almost had 400 folios. Picture, I think book format might be more than 500, 600 pages, and this is one of the most highly sought history, because even though we are previously written by Lama Tama Sonam Gyaltsen and also Ngorchen Kunchulan Roops, these are also often quoted. So therefore, Amisha Chronicles, or the collection, is very complete. And apart from that, he also has uh, the systematic approach of clearing the doubts with regard to the questions that has approached before in the previous histories. So I would recommend that the Jamgon Amishab's, I don't know whether it's translated, I don't think it's translated, but it is called Tumram Ngosar Bangzu, Amishab's collection. And this will be the most enlightening, I think, what they call the reference or the bibliography for those who really know Tibetan. And then when we talk about actually Sakya tradition, actually all the traditions in Tibetan, I think Tongto Tembe Gyaltsen, one who was the last, one of the last scholar from Sakya, and he resettled in Seattle. And then he wrote a history on this, very concise history on Sakya actually, but also tracing to the Indian origination. There I find a very good conclusion there, where he said that unlike the Indian schools, the four schools of like Vaibhashikas, Sautantrikas, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika, which are actually differentiated, or they are differentiated based on the multiple interpretations, but that is the case of only the Indian four schools. Whereas if you look at the historical formation of the schools like Sakya, Nyingma, Gyaluk, Kagyus, or within the Sakya like Sarpa, Murpa, and Songpa, and maybe Potong or Jonang or Shalu, which are a little bit controversial nowadays because they are independent. But the Tongto Tembe Gyaltsen, the late scholars say that these are mostly determined by the factor of difference in the lineage of masters and the especially different approach in the main central practices, including the rituals, that determines the differences in those sub-schools and inter-religious school of Tibetan Buddhism. So that is very much makes sense to me as a reader of all the schools, and I think he has made a very good remark on that, which is a very what we call a complete sort of conclusion, a synthesis of all the evolution of the Tibetan school. So therefore, I mean, when we talk about historical anecdotes, it's very vast, and one single person like me cannot cover all those things. Even though I try, maybe my whole lifetime, it will be not sufficient because even like Sagi painted, it took him 25 years to become the Pandit of his generation, just as his biography stated. He was actually, for the 25 continuous life, he was blessed by the Manjushri. Therefore, a common person like us cannot cover all the certain nuances and the importance of the Sakya school, likewise Nyingma Kagyu Kilu. But here I will just highlight some important factors that I find it important to highlight and that might not be a little bit celebrated. For instance, normally when we learn about the history of Sakya, it begins with the three titles. And just like the systematic writing style of Amisha, actually Sakya is said to be the religious tradition that is known by three titles. Those are the Vosilai Tungyu, the clear light God's line, and then Kungi, the Kun Parge, the middle bond between the Kun conflict, and then this third line, and the third title is the title of Sakya, based on the locality or the place name. Um, all those religion actually sometimes get the name based on places, based on their teachers, based on the teachings. So the Sakya is actually a title based on the place name because the gray earth or the white earth that was prophesied by Atisha also, and also in the dream of Kunja Gyalpo, it was the place actually Pempuri before, but then they actually renamed that based on that prophecies, and it has been going on until now. So the name, so these three names are the key starting point in the history of Sakya as per Amishab's the presentation also. And then the key figures, if you talk about the key figures, normally we know the five founding masters of Sakya, which is Sajin Kumangimbo, Sakya Pentita, Jesuit Tabaki, and Sonam Tsemo, and Winchagil Pakpa. And these three are actually within the Sakya local tradition. They are known as the three whites because the three of them are not celibate, and true rates because Govind Shakil Papa and Sakya Pandita was actually fully ordained bhikshus. And this will again, I will come back in the next chapter of impact of the Sakya. And then Virupa is also the one that I will talk a little bit about, and then Romilo Zawa, why he is very crucial, and why Sachin Kumanyima played a very important role in the transmission of the Lamde, which is the central text of the Sakya. And then if time permits, I will talk about the current, I mean, the curriculum of the Sakya school or the Sheras that which we studied, and how it was influenced by mostly like the start and this in the pre, let's say in the time of Zongsa's school of Jubilotu's time and Zongsa Shera, how we follow the same 18 grade text, and it was known by the Taksin Chok case, and why it is actually mostly it is non-aligned per one school text curriculum, but it also has sometimes aligned with the Sakya school because one of the key category of this 18 texts or the six texts actually belongs to the Sakya itself, which is studied by widely by all the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And then I will talk about a little bit about the discussion on the views of Sakya and why Kunking Goramba play a significant role in that. And then the conclusion part. So, and that will be the theme. And then we will go to the slide of number 4, slide number 4, which the first one I already said that the three names, the Sakya is actually known by the way. So, Lai Tungyu, Temepungi, Tungi, and Sakya. And it itself also has subdivision. Sakya itself, where the Sakya Langan Chamber or the central monastery held by the Sakya Komas are actually one seat, but also the main seat. And then there is Ngor School, founded by Ngojin Kunga Sangbo, the Tsarpa School, which is also known as the school founded by Sarjan Rosal Kyaso, also the propounder of the uncommon Lamde teachings, and Konkar and Zongba that happened during time of Zongba Kunga Namgyal. It was same time when Ngojin Kunga Sangbo was actually uh, flourishing or getting famous. And the founder of the Zongba actually and the Ngorchen, both are said to be very famous throughout Tibet called Nagalkeba Kunga Namni, the two Kungas who are known for their excellence in tantras, and that is the main reason why they have different liturgy and rituals, but the context of them they are same, and that's why they become little subsection within the Sakya without any conflict with regard to the interpretation of the main view of Sakya. And this will be found in Tongram Hosar Bangsa, as I said before, in the written by Jambu Amisha. And now there we are talking about now here the impact of the Sakya school in the beginning of the Tibetan Buddhism, and also after the dissolution of the Tibetan Buddhism by Lang Dharma, and how again Sakya played the key role again during the second revival of the Tibetan Buddhism, Tempa Chitar. And based on that, I will talk about the little bit about the five founding masters. So at the very beginning, when Tibetan Buddhism came to Tibet through the king of Chosun, Guru Padma Sambhava, and then at that time, actually, many many things happened. It was not just the establishment of Same that was enough to sustain the Dharma. To sustain the Dharma, normally everyone said that, even Sakya Pandita and all the four schools said that the root of the Dharma lies within the Vinaya. The essence of the Dharma lies within the Parjin or the Paramitas, and the singular most inner essence lies within the Vajrayana. So all these three was also established at that time, which we, if you look at the broader context of how the development of school happened at that time. And then I think during that time, in those three category, I think the Sakya, or not Sakya, but the Kun lineage, which was already existing at that point, was playing a key role. For example, when the Vinaya was first brought in Tibet by Shantarakshita and Khenpo Bodhisattvas, but this Khenpo Bodhisattva actually choose Semimidun, seven disciples, as experimental, whether they can sustain the Vinaya of Indian culture for the first time. It has never had. So it was like a pilot project. So then among the Semimidun, Kun Lui Wangpusungwa, Kun Nagaraja Rakshita is actually belonging to the Kun lineage. And he is the first Gelong, or he is the first monk to be ordained in Tibetan Buddhism during the time of Shantarakshita by himself and Khenpo Bodhisattva. So this is something I would like to highlight again during the first phase of Tibetan Buddhism when it was dawning. The Kun was actually playing a key role in sustaining the Vinaya. And then during the course of transmission of the Vajrayana teaching itself, again, when Kun Nagaraja Rakshita, Kunli Suma and his brothers, and all those the 25 special disciples, they actually received the Vajrakilaya for the first time. And that is the main reason why the Vajrakilaya is still practiced within the annual Tumcho, the annual Grand Puja in the Sakya Center right now. And it has been unbroken. And the 41st Sakya Committee has played a key role, because even though there was no monastery built, they actually perform this annual Grand Puja, even have to perform in the empty ground or whatever. He did that without unbreaking. So that's the reason why nowadays, when the Nyingmapa especially and Gelupas also, when they want to receive the Vajrakila empowerment, they always choose the lineage holder of the Sakya throne holder, because they believe that the transmission bestowed by the Guru Padma Sambhava to those 25 disciples, including Kun Nagaraja Rakshita, is still kept alive, because the current generation of lineage has still the bloodline of Kun. And this is one of the main reasons the Vajrayana is practiced throughout, even though the central practice of Sakya is actually Hevajra or the Lamde. That's different tantras. So therefore, if you look at this broader context of the first part of the Dharma transmission, the Kun lineage or the Sakya lineage has played a key role there. And then again, what I always has been telling before is that when the Sakya was founded in 1073 by Kun Kunja Gyalpo, it was the beginning of the Sangha Sarma also at the time, the new Tantra and the old Tantra. But at the same time, until then, his brother, everyone was actually said to be practicing the Vajrakilaya, the Nyingma tradition. So Koen Kunja Gyalpo seems to be, for me, I always say that he is a bridge between old transmission, old Tantra and the new Tantra. If you really wanted to find a bridge, I think it would be the best point to study about the Koen Kunja Gyalpo's or his brother, how they managed to shift or transmit from the period of transition from the Nyingma tradition to the Sakya Sarma tradition. So these are the three main things that I would like to highlight based on the impact or the contribution of the Sakya lineage holder at the very beginning of the Tibetan Buddhism development. And then the next slide, please. Yeah. So that's the Anga of the five founding master. You can see the central deity Devaja on the top. Virupa, who is the founder of the human founder of the teachings of the Devajara teachings, and also the main lineage for teaching for the Sakya Palamde teachings, and then the five founding masters surrounded by the Mongol and I think Chinese king and the below, and then there's a protector god. One of the main protector of Sakyapa, the Mahakala, is also there. The Banjara, the protector Banjara. So there, actually, before going to the slide, okay, we can go to the slide number 6. But before that, I will just talk that the Virupa, who is actually the first receiver of the Lamdit teachings, actually it was the Vajra at the time, propounded and given directly by the Vajra Nairatma, the concept of the Vajra, who appeared before him when he was in Nalanda. He actually got it in the midnight when he was practicing secretly in Nalanda. Actually, it was all the monks' quarter, and especially the Virupa was a fully ordained monk. So then the Narad, actually there was a lot of interesting stories with regard to Birupa, how he actually threw the mala and then how the Narad actually come and told him not to throw that and do confessions. But that time, what I really find, if you look at the every practice in Tibetan Buddhism, we always practice with Ngondo. So I think that's the same thing. When he actually was told to do confession, it was a part of Ngondo. It is not highlighted in history, but if you look at the pattern, you will realize before receiving any kind of high advanced teaching, I think there's a need for us to always purify or confess or balance your mind. And therefore, after that, it was from the 23rd day of the Sagatava, I think. And the 23rd day, he started to every day receive the teachings from Vajanaratma, and then for the sixth continuous day until the 29th day, he actually received the sixth bhumi of the Bodhisattva every day because based on the teaching that he received directly from Nairatma, and that became the very foundation of the Lamde that we are actually seeing nowadays in literature form. But then it was not in the literature form in those days, as you as you will see within the lifetime of Buddha. Not the teachings were not found in actually the letters. It was mostly in the speech form. And then that's the reason why Sajjan Kumanyama played a key role in around 12th century when he composed this 11 commentary. But I think there are more than that. But nowadays in Sakya literature, when it comes to Lamde, the 11 commentary is the basis of all the commentary and practice. And even if you have to quote or cite to the teachings, these 11 commentaries are mostly frequently coming up in a lot of later masters and commentaries of Morchen or Sarchens or Khenpo Wangchus everywhere, and even I think Korambas. So therefore, uh, so Biruba is a very unique man and very interesting figure in Buddhism, and especially if you look at the sayings also, uh, there are three key figures in the development of the Buddhism in overall. Like Birupa was known for his powers. Because of the powers, he was able to convert. I don't know whether it's a good term to say convert nowadays, but he was actually influential at that time to actually propagate the Buddhism, the Vajrayana teachings when Hinduism was very strong. And then later, King Ashoka, again, the third main key figure in the development of the Buddhism in overall context, is known for his wealth. Because of his wealth, he was able to use that to uh, propagate the Buddha Dharma. So in a way, the Birupa is a person who is overall look up as a person who actually used the power of his magical display, the yogic display, to suppress the demonic forces, the opposing forces, and then still he is considered by the Hindu, especially I think the Shaivanism, the followers of the Shiva, that he is still known as a Virupaksha. And if you go to Pashupatinath in Kathmandu, the main temple of Hinduism, you'll see this half statue coming out from the ground, and why it is kept separately. So all this proves that the Virupa has a very unique sort of power there. So he is the founder of the Lambe teachings that was directly associated with the human realm, coming from the Vajra and his concept directly. And then during the exposition of the Lamde, um, when Virupa actually gave the teachings, he gave actually there are two traditions in that. One is called the Pit instruction based Lamde and Pit instruction based teaching on the triple tantra of Vajra, and one is the commentary based teaching on the triple tantra or the triple tantra of the Vajra. And the triple tantra here refers to the root tantra, Mula Vajra tantra, and then the uncommon tantra of Panjar, Vajra Panjara, and then the common tantra of the Samputa tantras. These three are the triple tantra in this context. Triple tantra can be actually very confusing term. It depends on which situation we are talking. But in the historical talking, here it refers to these three literatures. And then he actually passes to Dombe Heruka, that is called the commentary base. And then it was actually transmitted to Krishnapa, Kanapa, that is said to be bit instruction based. That is which actually is the foundational of the current Lamde that we're practicing up to these days now. So that makes a huge difference there, because it has its own connotation. Why there's a difference between these two traditions? It was during the it's like all the tradition of Buddha, 84,000. It is always based on the differentiation of the student's capacity. So therefore, those who are said to be practicing until now is actually a category of students that follows the Lamde based on the fifth instruction tradition. So, and then Domi Lozawai, one has to always remember during the course of the development of Buddhism, not only Sakya tradition, because when again it comes to the later the second revival, the revival of the Tibetan Buddha Dharma after the Lang Dharma passed away, and the whole region of Tibetan was actually divided, and then even the sons of the Lang Dharma was fighting between them and dividing the regions, and also the queens play a role, and then that's the reason how it's like same like you can see in these movies, where family will plot against each other, and it's one of the not really sort of what you call the good time for practicing the Dharma, but still, Tibetan Buddhism was striving in a very small context because of few people like Lajeng Kompa Rapsal or uh, Halama Yeshe or the and Rogmi will also play a part a little bit on that time, because when Long Dharma actually, if you look at how he was able to, within his own lifetime, to dissolve the huge Dharma in a short period of time, because he knew that in order to destroy the Dharma, you have to destroy the root, and he know the technique, and that's why he used to destroy actually the monastic basis and almost all those who have the vows, because as like a Pandita, and also now when Rogmiloza was sent to India to study, his teacher told three students at that time. Romi was again with three students there, and they told them study Vinaya because it's the root of the Dharma. Because without the Vinaya, even if there are some so-called yogis will remain, that will not be sustaining the Dharma. And study the paramita because it's the essence of the Dharma. Because if you really wanted to generate the bodhicitta or go through the path and progress of the Buddha Dharma, to Buddhahood, there's no way you can not study the Paramitayana and study the Vajrayana because it is the only teaching that has the pit instruction to gain Buddhahood within one lifetime. So therefore, Lang Dharma know about this, and that's why he was able to. He was, let's say, successful in actually destroying the Dharma. But because of few like that, Mario Changsung, there was three figures in that will come at the very beginning of the revival attempt. At the same time, when Lang Dharma was alive, these three people would run to the Kham, to the May, or the lower part of the Tibet to actually with all the Vinaya texts. And this was the turning point, and again the foundation of the Vinaya in the revival attempt. Then it was the Lajeng Khompa Rapsal, first key figure who received the Vinaya vow again after that, and then who actually bestowed two Zhang Zhang Mikhepa Chu, the 10% of the Zhang who are very wise. And among them, when they become actually fully ordained monk, and among them were the teachers of Domi Lotsawa now. So therefore, Domi Lotsawa received the monkhood ordination from the same Lajeng Khompa Rapsal's the lineage, which was now starting to grow in Tibet. So that Domi Lotsawa actually helped in sustaining, in a way, you can say, the revival attempt of the Dharma in Tibetan Buddhism by again bestowing the monastic ordination, receiving the ordination because it was almost in a dire situation because of the Lang Dharma's the conquest, his war on the monastic assemblies. So therefore, you can see again, Domi Lotsawa has played a key role who now comes to become the main teacher of Kunkunji Khalpo. And Kunkunji Khalpo is the first founder of Sakya who received all the Lamdic teachings. That is the significance or the key characteristic that define the Sakya tradition until now from Domi Lotsawa. And Domi Lotsawa Shakya Yishe actually, most of you know, he was at the same time actually during the time of maybe a little bit earlier than Marble Lotsawa, and yeah, at that time there were a few others Lotsawa also. Lotsawa Rinzin Sambo was a little bit earlier than them. But Lotsawa Rinzin Sambo will be again connected to the Sakya tradition. I will just talk about this. Sakya tradition during the time of Sajin Kumang Yingpo is said to be the combination of the three kabapshi or the four the four receptor or the receiver of the four lineages or the four main pillar-like teachings from four translators. One, Domi Lozawa, from whom Sajjan Kumar received all the based instruction on the Lamdi teachings. And then he already received the commentary based from his father, and then Kunkunji Gyalpo, and then from Mallozawa again at the same time. Mallozawa was key figure who actually received all the teachings from the Naropa lineage of the Chakra Sambhara and the Vajrayogini, which was transmitted to the Sajjan Kung Yinpo by Mallozawa, and then Lozawa Rin Sangpo, who was not actually, I think, probably not alive during the time of Sajjan Kung Yinpo, but his disciple, but one of his disciples actually passed the teachings of the yogas and the Chugyong or the Dhammapalas, all the Dhammapalas teachings from Lotsawa Rinzangpo to Sajin Kung Yingpo, and then the fourth Lotsawa, Bari Lotsawa. Bari Lotsawa is actually the second throne holder before Sajin Kung Yingpo, because when his father passed away, he was very young. He was just 11. He was infant. His mother said that his mother was a very kind of a skillful lady who knows how this administration works. If we put him at a very young age, he might not sustain the Dharma. That's why she actually asked his teacher Parilosawa to become the throne holder until his son Sajin Gungbo reached the adulthood of the 18 years or 19 years of age. So from Parilosawa, he received all the Dutta or the sadhanas teachings, Dutta Gyasas, the hundred of sadhanas, the collection of more than hundred of sadhanas, and so forth. So that's why, until now, again, this is the main characteristic that define the Sakya tradition. Uniquely, it is said to be the combination of four great teachings coming from the four great translators of that time. So in a way, you can say that after the revival attempt of the issue, after the time of when the Buddhism declined, when these four Lotsavas were actually playing a key role in beginning the new phase of the Dharma revival, and Sakya actually was happening, existing at the same time, we receive all those teachings and has been a key vessel or the vase to receive all those teachings that continues until now. So therefore, the sustaining of the Dharma at that point was that also now the through the Romi Losao, you can sense that, you can surmise or conclude that Sakya tradition played a key role again in the revival of the Dharma. And and Sajong Gongying, the third throne holder of the Sakya, or among the first five founding masters, was very actually until him, as I said before, we don't have Alamdi teachings on literature in the textual basis, because his own teacher, from whom he received the Alamdi teaching, pit-based teaching, he confined him that you should not give this teaching for 20 years. He was restricted even to utter the single name of the Alamdi teachings. But then after he finished the 20 years of silence, then he started to teach his teaching, and through different disciples, he made question and answer, and those question and answer becomes the commentary, and they become in the form of 11 commentaries of Lamde. And that was the very beginning point of what you call the Lamde teachings in a textual form. So then again, I forgot to again highlight the Sachin Skunganyimbo very important role in the Lojong genre of texts in Tibet. Because when we call Lojong, we always think about the Atishas and Kadambas Lojong. We always forget that in Tibet during that time, Kinjabi Rinpoche, the late Kinjabi Rinpoche, the founder of Sakya College and Sakya IBA, where I studied both, he used to say that in Tibet during this time, there are more than 100 of Lojong teachings, but two were very famous. And one, the 7-point mind training of Atisha, and the second Lojong was actually departing from the four attachment knot, and which is actually Sajin Kumar Nyingpo's teaching, who received it directly when he was doing meditation around 12 years of 12 years old, when he was also praying and getting sick. At that time, actually, there was an incident happening, and I think Dumbu, I think it's called sometime. I think it's a smallpox disease, maybe, if I'm not correct with the translation. This disease was like rapidly making all the students sick at that time when he was very young. And Sajid Yimbo actually fell sick while he was actually nursing one of his friend, a monk there. And he caught the disease for himself, and he fell sick, and his mother actually was there, came and told him. Now, if you look at the background of the scene, as a human, how would your mother react? If my mother saw me sick, she will definitely cry. Maybe she will just say, let's go to the hospital, don't stop, let's stop the study, let's go back home. But that was not the case. You see, as I said before, when she was crucial in pointing Barilotsawa, and she was also crucial here when he was studying, Sajin Kumar was studying, he felt sick, but she realized that if she take the son back to home and just nurse him like you are actually spoiling the kid, that would not be good for the sake of the supposed responsible person in future. So in order to make him strong, she actually said to him, she didn't cry, but actually sternly said that it's good that you are sick. Now you have to use your own energy to get back. You have to show your power. You have to, what you call, show the resilience that you have. It was the very beginning of how Sajjan Kumar started to become adult at a very young age, finding this instruction from his mother that nothing comes in a way that you just wishful thinking is not enough. Just because you belong to a powerful family is not enough. You have to sustain by yourself. You have to recover from your disease by yourself without going back to the palace and so forth. So you see, if you look at these stories, you'll always find there are a lot more than the scholarly uh, depiction. They are more than that. Beyond that, there's so much called how a human can become stronger, resilient. If you look at the story of Jason Kunga Toljok, the 16th century master of Mustang, he talks about frequently about the mother, how she actually helped him when he was young monk, when he wanted to go to Tibet to study, and even when at the very completion of the teachings he gave, how she was always receptive, even when she was almost now passing away, dying, she will always not interrupt, but rather support his practice of even like small offering of sock offering. Like she will say, I feel like when you do the sock, even she was now lying in the bed, she will say like, you are doing the sock like if you're offering it to the takinis, I'm the one of the takinis who's receiving this blessing is so much delicious, even though she cannot eat food at all. You see, these are very different genre of biographical anecdotes we don't highlight in the nowadays. We just talk about the wise approach. We just talk about the scholarly achievements or the Siddha achievement, but these are very much related to the modern uh, way of living, which we fail to sometimes understand. So it is all because of our own intellectual what you call this hunger for not only knowing the intellectual side, but forgetting the human side. But these teachings of the biographies or the autobiographies of every lamas will somehow, in a way, secretly or indirectly, give you this kind of information of the reflection of how human deal when things happen like disease, when somebody is passing away and so forth. So Sajjan Kung Yamba was again very much a big contribution in the Lojong genre, on the general context of the Lojong genre in Tibetan literature, because of his composition of departing from the four attachment, which was on par at the same level with the 7 point of mind trainings of Atisha in Tibet. And Sakya painted and Dogen Chigil Pabas, most of you, and Sonam Sem and Jizun Metabagens were direct disciple of Sajjan Kunyumbu, and his own son, who was the lineage masters of Lamde, and especially Jizun Metabagens, his commentary, especially the Gur, are very much like the Milarepa Gur. We always, when it comes to Gur, we always say that it's Milarepa Gur. But then, if you read the course of the Jesuit Matapakyanse, it's very poetic, very much like it's not like very heavy. It can be very much poetic. Like you spend your whole life. This is one very favorite of mine saying you spend your whole life running, chasing away for next thing, and even when you're about to die, now you are going to chase for your next destination. So it is very poetically rendering, and these schools are very important, and it will frequently come in the Lamde teachings because it has again connotation of a lot of instruction based on shamatas, vipassana, and also the tantras, evajra, and so forth. And then Sakya Pentita, most of you already knows he was the very actually Kinjab Rinpoche. He listed at least 11 uh, uncommon qualities, which I happened to translate for one of the magazine as requested by his direct student and my main guru, Kinjal Sonam Gyasbu, was actually running a nuns college back there. And it he listed, Abhi Rinpoche listed like 11 qualities that was not found in others master in Tibetan or whole Tibetan list of masters. Like, for example, he was the first Pandita in the history of Tibetan who got the title directly from Shakya Bhadra, who was happening to visit Tibet at that time. And then there are a lot of things like who invited him. Actually, go think Gokul Losawa, I think one Tupu Losawa, sorry, Tupu Losawa was the one who actually invited Sakya Pandita, the Sakya Bhadra and his retinue students. But Sakya Pandita was actually the one who actually got the most out of Sakya Bhadra, teaching on all the five main, what you call the science or the knowledge of fields, and the remaining minor science, all the three science, five, 10 sciences was mastered during the time of Sakya Bhadra and by Sakya. That's why Sakya Bhadra was actually amazed by how Sakya was so much fluent in the Sanskrit language that he could translate the Paramana Bhartika of the Dharmakirti from Sanskrit without looking at any dictionary or without relying on any Indian Pandits. He actually translated that into Tibetan. So it's the first time in the history that happened. And based on such achievement, he received the title called Pandita for the first time. So this is one of the 11 qualities I very much mentioned, and there are many qualities there which I vaguely remember. And yeah, so I don't remember all of those, but yeah, there and first Pandita, and then he's also the one who translated from the Sanskrit to Tibetan without relying on the help of the other Indian scholars. And he also composed the teaching of Samaritir, the Pramana Yukti Nidhi, which is the collection of all the teachings of Dharmakirti and Dignaga that has never happened before in the Indian literature also, because in Indian literatures, Pramana were only learned on based on different texts. It was never synthesized. Sakya Pandita was the first to synthesize the Pramana in one text. And that is also one of the impact that contributed, and that is also the reason why still now the four schools actually study the Tibetan four schools study the Sakya text when it comes to Pramana learning. And that was also beginning of what we call the systematic reform of how the debating style changes from the Chapachuki Singhes on the Perangarapa style to the new style of Sakya how they especially based on the Swatantrika's reasoning. I'm not talking about Madhyamika school, but Swatantrika here it refers to the logical reasoning system or the syllogism. Here actually also he has a very one, I think the 10th chapter of his, the 11th chapter of Brahmana Upanishad talks about extensive about the systematic approach of how to debate or how to generate the logical approach or the syllogism based on the premise what is called valid cognition, what is non-valid cognition. Everything is very clearly understandable there. So therefore, it is one of the biggest contribution because if you have to study Dharmakirti Dignaga text, it's so much difficult still for us because it is Indian classical text and it's very difficult. So therefore, you can see all this contribution. And then Jogin Shakya Papa, all most of you know, he was the very favorite in the court of. He was invited by Godan Khan, and then during the time of Sakya Pandita, he went again during the time of Kublai Khan. Then he received the what we call the modern day, I mean, Tibetan border as a gift from the Mongol Empire. Now it is a little bit debatable, some people say, but just yesterday I had this coffee talk with Daniel, and he did his study PhD on that, and he has different interpretation, but we'll learn about that maybe in this lecture. But general understanding for a lot of the most of the Tibetan is that historian is that Rukun Sherpa was the one who actually received the modern so-called the boundaries or the geographical location of Tibet as a gift because he actually we say that in the history he gave the empowerments, especially the teachings of I think Hevajra and especially his queen, Kublai Khan King's queen, was very much in favor of Durban Shiga Papa. And then he got this as a gift. And then some people say it's actually the Tikor Chuksum. And I won't go deep on the history of political administration because that's not my field. But they say the Tikor Chuksum was actually also a gift for Durban Shiga Papa. Therefore, he was one of the first Tibet. So therefore, a king in Tibet. So therefore, now I will highlight in the in a political aspect also. If you look at the whole history, the beginning of the Tibetan, the Yalung dynasty until the time of Sakya, the Dogen Shige Papa, or beyond that, you'll know that the unity of the unity, the whole unity, or the period when the unity of so-called United Tibet was known, was only happening or happened, in my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. Happened during two periods. One during the Sonzen Gumbo period, and then second during the time of Dogen Shige Papa. So only during these two figures' time you will see the intact or the unity of Tibetan region, and therefore, in a way, you can say Sakya has played a key role again in the political integration of the Tibetan, what we call the administration. So this is something that I would like to highlight based on the political aspect, even though maybe I'm not correct, because as as we say that the river Ganga can be seen in different perspective by different sentient beings. The gods see as a nectar, we see as a water. The hungry ghosts see the Ganga as a process blood. So therefore, maybe some people have different notions. So I would still be open to question, answer, and debate. I'm in a suggestion. I would be very much glad to have feedbacks. So then, oh, I'm still halfway through, so I will just jump. Then the closing historic statement made by 2014 actually changed by the both houses. The palace, we have a Punso Palace and the Sakya Doma Podang, the Doma Palace, which is the two palaces in Sakya hierarchy right now, even though it was four before, but the remaining houses were cease to exist because all of those throne holders become fully ordained monk, and without the higher, there is no hierarchy. So the only two remaining palaces of we have in Sakya hierarchy is called Hunzo Potang and Doma Potang. The Doma Potang is currently led by the 41st Sakya Poma Tenzin Rinpoche and his two sons, 42nd Ratnavajra Rinpoche and 43rd Gyanavajra Rinpoche. And Punzo Potang is actually established by actually these two photons were established around 33rd throne holder, maybe. I'm not sure, I'm not sure. But Phuntsho Palace is currently, it was established in Seattle by Dajen Rinpoche, Phuntsho Potong Dajen Rinpoche, who was very close to Eugene Smith and also Rockefeller Foundation, who invited them, and Turel Wiley and all this, especially Eugene Smith. If you look at his biography, you will always see a name called Dejun Rinpoche, and that is the uncle of Dejun and the Dakshin Rinpoche Phuntsho Palace Dangmo, the Queen Mother. So then both of them used in until then there was a system of alternative throne holding system where one house will hold for one term, and then when he children come away or when he passed away, the other house has its turn. So there is an alternative basis. But since 2014, a historic statement was made by both houses when both in Lumbini, actually, it was in the Lumbini, but it was written before that, but was kept secret. So that now this current system and from 2015 is that all the Tumsis who are qualified based on studies, meditation, retreats, Lamde practice, and so forth are only qualifiable who are actually now going to be a throne holder based on 3 years tenure. That is very much close to the Morpa system we have. In the Ngor, we have four palaces. They took alternate basis of 3 years, and that was actually advised by the previous Zongsa Khyentse Chogyal. So that's the new changes we have in the hierarchy system. So Lamde in the slide number 11, Hamde, we already talk about that, the true traditions and how it actually evolved into Tsokshe and Lobshe. Currently, Lamde is known by two category called Tsokshe that is given to a common people, and Lobshe that takes a while, long because it is only given to disciples, like a whisper lineage sort of thing. But nowadays we don't have because due to a lot of people receiving that, but it still take a lot of. So Lamde is the Lamde is common Lamde and uncommon Lamde. based on the receptive students' capacities. And from the literature, as I said before, it was a turning point when Sajin Kung Imbo composed the Namdal Chukchik, or in slide number 12, Namdal Chukchik, the Lavin commentary. That was the turning point in the literature, in the textual basis for the Lamde to evolve and basis for the practice. Before that, it was mostly, it was only sustaining in the form of uh, oral lineage. Okay, Jason was a topper play a key role in expanding that. And then I think we have only 5 minutes remaining, right?
We can go a little bit over if you want, because we just go into the question time. So yeah, if you want to
Yeah,
do
because
another, say, 15 minutes.
yeah, I was jumping too much.
Okay.
That's the
Which
problem.
slide would you like to go to next?
I would like to go to for 13 pre-curriculum, maybe. I'll just go to the pre-curriculum and post-curriculum of Sakyapa. Yeah.
Thank you.
So then I've missed a lot of points there because going through different portion of teachings, maybe not so organized my presentation, so I apologize. But I'll talk about the curriculum of Sakyapa. So the curriculum of Sakyapa is based on the 18 great treatises of Sakya, which is called Taksin Chopke, and which is based on the 5 branches of studies like Abhidharma, Vinaya, Pramana, and then Madhyamika, and then Pramana and Abhidharma, and the Pragya Paramitas, the genre of teachings. And all these 18 are actually based on that, especially the sixth one. When it's considered the sixth field of study, then it is actually referring to the three vows of Sakyapentita. Now you see Sakyapentita's contribution to the literature of Buddhism was in general on a larger impact, on a larger basis. It was not only limited to the Sakyapa or it just it was actually accepted by the whole schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and that's called the Domsum, the Trisambara Pravedana, or the three distinguishing of the three vows, the Vinaya, the Bodhicitta, and the Vajrayana vows, combined and again synthesized in one singular text. It has never been done before, and this is considered as the seminal work or the magnum opus of Sakyapentita. And there has a lot of translation. I think this text has a lot of translation that you can study. And now, interesting fact is that this text was also the basis for further future and polemical sort of discourses happening, because Sagapindra actually here in this text has refuted a lot of claims that was not according to the principles of the Buddha Dharma and so forth, especially also in the ritual aspect, Vajrayana aspects, meditation aspects, interpretation of the views. Everything was completely clarified and refuted through the logical reasonings in a valid format. So therefore, this gives pave way for later masters who give their own commentary. And I think there are like more than, if you count all the texts of four schools, it will be many hundreds of texts just based on the foundational teaching of the Sakya Pentita. That's why it's very important contribution for the study, uh, for the Tibetan the philosophical studies. Therefore, this is one of the unique uh, impact of Sakya Pentita's on the contribution of study. And the 18 Taksin Chokye, as I said, all the commentaries based on this five or the six main literature, as I said before, is the main basis of study for us, which goes on yearly basis. And we begin by the easiest text, like the Bodhisattva Avatara, and then in the next year, we'll study about the Pramana, starting with the Sakyapentita's Pramana Yuktini, because it's synthesized and it gives you the whole overview of what's going to happen in next difficult text of Pramana Vartika or Pramana Vinishchaya or the Dignakas texts are. So it's very crucial that how the systematic texts have been formed is starting from the easiest to difficult, and it's starting with the easiest one that leads you to the difficult text. There is a systematic system that was actually formulated in Dzongsa Sheta in Tibet, and we still follow the same. And because Kinja Rinpoche was the first figure who was the first want to establish the Tibetan Kshetra in India in 1972. It was even established before, I would say, the Tensa Sum of Gelugpa. The Sindhi Kasum was established only around 80s, if I'm not correct. At that time, maybe Tsingy Dazang in Dharamsala might be the only one around the time of Sakya College establishment. So therefore, Sakya College is the first of its kind to be established in India, outside of Tibet. And Kenja Rinpoche's role in making this curriculum was the key thing that sustained the later new kshetras of Sakya, like the what do you call the in Darjeeling there was one, and then also Purwala, which is the main seat of His Holiness the Sakya Koma Tenzin Rinpoche. There is one kshetra there, and Songsa also in Bir have the same systematic uh, theme following this 18 texts. But actually, when we study the 18 texts, it's not limited to that. We actually have more sub commentaries. It will be, at least in my count, maybe more than 50 that we have to study during those uh, tenure of completing your Shastri, like the Kachupa, the minimum degree of 8 years, and then after the 10 years you receive your Lupan Acharya, and then you can do the Guramba we have now in Sakya College. That was not that was actually declined in Tibet for a while. Now they have established this new curriculum called Bumrampa, equivalent to PhD. They call that, where you have to study both Sutra and Tantra again. So the minimum 8 years course, which is equivalent to BA, which is called Kachupa in Sakya name degree, which is equivalent to BA, offers you to study these 5 branches of science, Buddhist philosophical studies, and that can lead you to at least like 40 or 50 commentaries just within the Sakyapa traditions. And most of the preferred commentary are actually, we study in Sakya College, or the rest of the school of Sakya is actually Goramba Sonam Singhe's text. His text is actually the 13 canons, and the 11 one, and then the 12, the rest of the two is called Kakong, or the supplementary context, because it was not found, it was only found afterwards. So the 13 canons offers you the real or the foundational approach of the current generation of the teachers when it comes to exposition of especially the sutric interpretations and the sutric interpretation of especially the view of Madhyamika. And therefore, Goramba Sunan Sangye is the most sought after or widely preferred scholars' work that we study in all the Sakya Kshetras nowadays, and also in previously, starting from, let's say, 18th century. So we also have a saying that the Goramba text is much more closer to the 5 founding masters' text, unlike his contemporary like Shagya Chokden, who is very much popular for other schools. And Shagya Chokden, Taksang Lotsawa, and Goramba, where we have a saying that they are the 3 scholars known by their excellence in both Sutra and Tantra. And you know that because if you look at the Taksang Lotsawa text, it's very extensive, very informative, and almost unequal. If you look at the commentary of Goramba, especially when it comes to the interpretation of the view, it's very clear, concise. And when Shagya Chowdhury, if you look at his works, it's very extensive and very sort of intellectually rich, and you can actually it actually helps you to think widely, getting out of the box. If you really wanted to think out of the box within the Sakyapa literature, I think Shagya Chowdhury text actually helps in that. But still, the Kurumpa text is the most crucial one when it comes to knowing your ground or the foundation. When you talk on the perspective, when you talk from the perspective of Sakyapa school. And Ngorjin Kunga Sampo texts and Kunjulundu are mostly also preferred in the context of Tantra's texts and the Lamatama Sonam Gyaltsen's texts and the Namishaps. There are a lot of texts and thousands of texts there, which are actually mostly also aligned with the tantric sort of description, which I don't have the jurisdiction or the authority to talk about, but it is the most crucial when it comes to practice of Vajrayana. These texts are always what you call suggested or compulsory. And then Next slide 14. And so then in the slide number 14, you can see that in recent years from 60s until now, Khenpo Rinchen, Sakya Tenzin, Kungwa Gongchu, and Khenpo Rinpoche. These were the pillar of actually those Sakya study in India. And most of you will already know these figures like Khenpo Rinchen was also the teacher of many great gurus, and Khenpo Sakya Tenzin also, especially Khenpo Sakya Tenzin is actually contributed in the maintaining of the Kamalashila Bhavana Krama in India. When the transmission was lost, he was the one who actually kept that and transmitted that again in India. And Kenji Kumamajo, the founder of the Zongsa Sheda in India, where the hundreds of monks have studied and become Khenpos. And Kenji Rinpoche, who was the founder of Sakya College in Sakya IBA, where I'm currently working, is actually what you call contribution not only is limited in those Sheta, but in the new Sheta called Sakya Institute of Vajrayana, that was founded by Ngor Ludin Rinpoche in Manduwala, the latest college, is only teaching about the Sakya Vajrayana text. The curriculum is on of that text was also prepared by Khenpo Rinpoche before he passed away. And now the Institute of Vajrayana in Manduwala actually follow the curriculum based on the last the curriculum that was made by Khenpo Rinpoche before he passed away. Okay, and then so before going to the conclusion in page of 18 slide, I will just talk about the impact of Gorompa, or just discussion about the view, It's like when it comes to the discussion of the Sakya Bhakti, it is always important to remember that all the Siddhanta, the Dutta, in the word of Taksang Losava, these are only based on the different interpretations. And likewise, because the Buddha was actually, when he taught the teachings, he sometimes said there is a form existing, but when he goes to the Grita Kutta, the second wheel of the turning of the wheel of Dharma, he said that everything is non-existence. People were confused. But in the same manner, I think the Dutta, or the evolution of the four schools, of whether it's in Indian schools, Buddhist schools, or in the context of the Tibetan four Buddhism schools, I think it's because of we have different capacity, mental capacity, that we see things differently, and that plays a key role in sometime distinguishing or formulating of the new schools. And so therefore, it's not each and one of us to make a judgment whether it's good or bad. But in a way, I think just like when Khenpo Wangpo and Kongtrul Rinpoche, they started this movement called the non-sectarianism. I mean, in a way, when you study, you share us, I mean, that is also very helpful. And that's what we do sometimes. We have to study about Tsongkhapa text, when it especially come to the study of the Madhyamika based on the Gorompa commentary. We have to do that with respect, and, and therefore, whether it's an interpretation, especially with regard to the Madhyamika view, and refutation of the Chitta, the Alaya Vijnana, which is the key difference between the Yellow school, the Gelupa school and the Sagyapa school. It's just, I think, for us as a student, we take it as a opportunity to gain our own knowledge through discussion. And discussion has been the part of the mode of studies in Tibetan Buddhism since the time of the founding of the Tibetan literature. And therefore, all this, if you look at all the commentaries of all the four schools, you'll find commonly that it is based on Gaksha Pangsum. Kappa means refutation, Shapa means assertion or claim, and Pangwa means, again, countering those second dispute that has become in course of the teachings. So even the author, like Gorompa, he will again make a clarification of his own claim, not making just a claim, but even if the claim, if it is followed by the question, he will actually answer that in his own commentary. So You see, I mean, that's the beauty about these literature about Buddhism. It is not only limited to a certain sort of rigid dialogue where a teacher will speak and rest have to remain just silent and don't questions. But all these thousands of teachings, all the four schools, has the beauty of what you call questioning themselves, refuting themselves, or if somebody refute, making a presentation of how it is actually correct through the system of uh, validities based on whether it's a Swatantrika logic or Prasangika logic. So therefore, in a conclusion, in the 18th slide, I would say that just as Taksan Lozawa said, uh, when it comes to defining a particular school in the context of its origination and flourishment, the view or the history of each school should be taken into account as the main characteristics, along with the path and conduct. Shilam Desum is sometimes very importantly and used as a key aspect to uh, identify a school, even in the past, even now, even in Indian culture, and even in the Tibetan culture. So basis, the path, and the result is the one also the framework, a theoretical framework where you can see the difference between school, or you can use it as a tool to whether they have a difference or not. So in other words, Dutta is a result of studies, analysis, contemplation. Dutta or the schools are actually a result of study, contemplation, and meditative effort. So we should not just disregard it as a mere sort of discussion between like two scholars in a coffee shop. It's actually a result of centuries and decades of hardship of thinking, contemplating, debating, finally reaching to some conviction that they found it very beneficial for the sentient beings. And that's why they create all these huge teachings or literatures or the corpuses of teaching. So we should not disregard just just because they belong to this school or that school. We should all appreciate the fact that one single canon has been a result of decades and centuries of ideas, and this filtering of the idea is what my teacher said in India, that the filtering of the ideas and when it reaches to some kind of conclusion is called siddhanta or the view. The drishti itself is a view, but when it becomes a school, it becomes tutap or the siddhanta. So therefore, there's a very, I mean, huge message there. So, so instead of learning about the difference, what we can actually learn about the overlapping between the different schools, it will be very helpful in generating respect for inter schools or external schools, and that should be the attitude whenever we study about the history or the biography or the literatures or philosophy of any schools. So with this, I would like to conclude my talk, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much for that vast historical sweep. We have about 10 minutes. Do we have any questions? If you do have a question, you can either send me a message in chat or you can use the raise hand. So, yes, David, I'll just ask you to unmute. Would you like to ask your question?
Okay, I'm sure there are many, many people